In Ukraine, one person was killed, more than 24 others were injured as Russia's military launched a third straight night of attacks on the Black Sea port cities of Mikhailov and Odesa. The attacks came as Russia's defense ministry warned ships against sailing into Ukraine's Black Sea ports, saying they'll be considered parties to the Ukrainian conflict. The threat followed the Kremlin's withdrawal from the Black Sea grain deal, which allowed safe passage of food and fertilizer from Ukraine. On Wednesday, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accused Russia of directly targeting grain silos at Black Sea ports.
This terrorist attack proves that their target is not only Ukraine and not only the lives of our people. In the ports that were attacked today, there were about 1 million tons of food stored. It is precisely that amount that should have already been delivered to consumer countries in Africa and Asia.
In Kenya, local media report at least 6 people were killed Wednesday as a 3-day protest against tax hikes and soaring cost of living kicked off. The ongoing anti-government demonstrations have caused unrest in the capital, Nairobi, and other cities, shuttering schools and businesses. Last week, at least 14 people died in protests, at least 10 of whom were shot and killed by police. The opposition leader, Raila Odinga, called for protests after President William Ruto announced the tax increases last month. This is a protester from Kibera in Nairobi.
We came out on our own initiative. Nobody made us protest. We are out here because we are tired. If they want, they should just sell the country and everyone get their share and plan for themselves.
In Afghanistan, dozens of women held a demonstration in the capital, Kabul, Wednesday, protesting against the Taliban's decision to shut down thousands of beauty parlors and salons nationwide. Taliban officers responded by firing water cannons and deploying tasers against the women before shooting their guns into the air to break up the protest. In Iraq, protesters stormed the Swedish embassy in central Baghdad Wednesday, starting a small fire before they were driven away by Iraqi police armed with electric batons. No embassy staff members were injured in the protest, which was condemned by the foreign ministries of both Sweden and Iraq. Protesters were angered over the burning of a Quran outside a mosque in Stockholm last month. In Egypt, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has pardoned the detained Italian-Egyptian human rights researcher Patrick Zaki and lawyer Mohamed El-Bakr. Zaki's pardon came just 1 day after he was sentenced to 3 years in prison for writing about the discrimination he suffered as a member of Egypt's Coptic Christian community. Mohamed El-Bakr is the lawyer for technologist, blogger, and writer Alaa Abdel Fattah, a leading activist in the 2011 revolution and Egypt's most prominent political prisoner. El-Bakr was arrested in 2019 and sentenced to 4 years in prison in 2021 for his work defending El-Fattah. You can see our interviews with Alaa Abdel Fattah and our coverage of his case at democracynow.org. Morocco's king has invited Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for an official state visit. The invitation by King Mohammed VI was announced just 2 days after Israel recognized Morocco's claim of sovereignty over Western Sahara, the territory it's occupied since 1975 in defiance of the United Nations and international law. In Peru, tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets of Lima Wednesday to demand interim President Dina Boluarte step down. Boluarte came to power following the ouster of leftist President Pedro Castillo in December of last year. Dozens of protesters were killed in the ensuing crackdown by police and security forces.
This government caused a genocide. It killed 80 innocent lives, and the people will never forgive this. This is the reason we're here today. This is an immoral and incapable government. This government has only suppressed us.
Demonstrators are calling out persistent inequality and poverty in Peru. A new report by a congressional watchdog highlights the growing price of maintaining the Pentagon's nuclear command, control, and communication systems. The Congressional Budget Office said the cost of operating, upgrading, and maintaining U.S. nuclear command is expected to reach $117 billion over the coming decade, a $23 billion increase compared to an estimate made just 2 years ago. The report was released as Vermont Independent Senator Bernie Sanders proposed amendments that would cut the U.S. military budget by 10% compared to the record $886 billion budget National Defense Authorization Act approved by the House of Representatives last week. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said Democrats would not block a vote on the Pentagon's policy of paying for employees' abortion-related travel if it can end Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville's months-long holdup of military appointments. Tuberville recently came under fire for defending white nationalists in the military. A federal judge has rejected former President Trump's request for a new trial after a New York jury ordered Trump to pay $5 million to the writer E. Jean Carroll for sexually abusing her at a department store in the 1990s and defaming her. U.S. District Judge Lewis Kaplan on Wednesday rejected claims by Trump's lawyers that the verdict was a seriously erroneous result and a miscarriage of justice. Kaplan wrote, quote, "The finding that Ms. Carroll failed to prove that she was raped within the meaning of the New York penal law does not mean that she failed to prove that Mr. Trump raped her, as many people commonly understand the word rape. Indeed, as the evidence at trial recounted below makes clear, the jury found that Mr. Trump, in fact, did exactly that," the judge said. In Mississippi, a 16-year-old immigrant died Friday after he was injured while working at a poultry plant in the city of Hattiesburg. Duvan Tomas Perez was a middle school student who came to the U.S. 6 years ago from Guatemala. Witnesses say the teen's fatal injury came as he was cleaning heavy machinery that was left on, an apparent major safety violation. Several U.S. states have recently rolled back child labor laws, though Mississippi law does not allow minors to be employed in slaughterhouses and meatpacking plants. To see our recent interview with the Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times reporter Hannah Dreier about child labor in the U.S., go to democracynow.org. New York City has agreed to pay more than $13 million to settle a lawsuit brought by more than 1,000 protesters who faced aggressive police behavior that violated their civil and constitutional rights during the 2020 uprising that followed the murder of George Floyd. The settlement announced today is the largest amount paid to protesters in a class-action suit in U.S. history. Researchers with the National Lawyers Guild combed through thousands of social media posts and police body camera and helicopter videos. They documented numerous cases of improper use of force by New York police officers who were filmed beating protesters with batons, unleashing pepper spray, and aggressively using a tactic called kettling to trap and arrest protesters en masse. Today's settlement's separate from another case the city settled in March with hundreds of people who were kettled, beaten, detained, and arrested by New York police officers at a June 2020 protest in the Bronx. In labor news, members of the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, or IATSE, are voting this week to authorize a strike that could see Broadway and touring shows halted by the end of the week. The strike would affect some 1,500 union members working as stagehands, hair and makeup artists, and wardrobe personnel. Contract negotiations have stalled as workers fight for better health care, wages, and housing for touring crews. This comes as Hollywood remains effectively at a standstill, as twin writer and actor strikes show no sign of ending. The WGA and SAG-AFTRA filed a complaint with the National Labor Relations Board this week against Comcast NBC Universal, which the unions say blocked a sidewalk picketing area, forcing strikers to walk on busy roads. Meanwhile, L.A. City Controller Kenneth Mejia said the city did not issue any trimming permits for the shade-providing trees outside Universal Studios, which were trimmed down where union members are picketing.